Hello there and welcome back to the studio today. Something's missing. What's missing? Can you guess? Alright, if you have guessed a palette, yes, I'm missing a palette, but check this out. I'm just going to move this painting out of the way for now so we can unbox this new palette together. Let's put this over here. Please handle with care, fragile, do not drop. And they even put that sticker on twice. And it even says do not bend. So let's see if this palette made it here safely. And before I go any further, I should say that no one is paying me to make this video. I paid for this palette on my own. This is a palette that I've been waiting for a long time, and I'm really excited about it. So let's get something to open this. And I think that this razor ought to do just fine. And I'm gonna be very careful not to cut through the cardboard because I do not want to damage my brand new palette. Alright, you know what, we're painters. Let's use the palette knife to help out with the unboxing. This is fun. Never done an unboxing video before. Using my palette knife. See, you're a true painter if you're using your palette knife for things other than painting. It's a joke. That's a joke, okay? Don't take me seriously with that. Oh, I can see it. I can see it. There it is. That's our first glimpse of the palette. And here it is. Now that is amazing. One last thing to do before this palette is officially ours to use. I gotta get rid of the plastic here. So of course I'm going to use my palette knife. What? I mean, look at the size, okay? See if you can see me. Look at the size of this palette. Yep, go ahead, make your jokes. I know, but I am excited to finally have a new palette. To me, palettes are kind of like musical instruments. What I think musical instruments would be like to musicians, or I don't know. To me, the craftsmanship of a palette is, to me, it's like somewhat of what a violin must feel to a violinist. I don't know, but it's such an amazing feeling. And now here are all of my handheld palettes, featuring one that you still haven't seen yet, and it is the cheapest of them all. This is a plexiglass palette. Yeah, it's just a cheap plexiglass palette, and what I did was I sanded it to kind of remove the glare so it wouldn't glare as much, and I also sanded the corners so it's a little bit softer and easier to hold. You will see this one, you're very likely to see this one in the future for water mixable oil paints. Like I said, that I wanted to have a palette to hold for water mixable oil paints. Though it's a very tiny palette, I think that it'll do really nicely when we work with water mixables. And this is just a cheap generic, I don't even think it had a name brand, to be honest. It's a cheap generic plexiglass palette, the kind you can probably find in, like, I don't know, any kind of art store. Just sand it down. Here's the one I use probably the most. It's from the same brand, the New Wave brand, the brand that we're going to be using for that larger palette that we just got in the mail. So it's kind of middle-sized. I think this is the one that you saw in yesterday's video. I think, yeah, it's the one you saw in yesterday's video. I think it is the lightest of them all, and I think it's just the most handy of them all. This is the one that I take mostly whenever I go to painting sessions and things like that. So again, I really like to have a multitude of different palettes. This is kind of the more, I don't know, travel-friendly kind of palette. It's just that it doesn't have as much mixing space. I prefer to have more mixing space. And now this, I think it's a Jack Richardson palette. This is actually the first, I think this is the first wooden palette that you've seen in my YouTube channel from the very early days, and I think it's still the one that's on the banner of my YouTube channel, the one with the brushes on it and stuff, the one that's pictured on my YouTube channel. And yeah, this is the first one that I had. This is more of a tabouret kind of palette, to be honest. I did finish this one on my own, I remember, with just linseed oil. As you can see, the back is not finished. Oh, yeah, it's Richardson, Jack Richardson. The only thing, it's not really comfortable to hold. I don't know if you can see here, but there's like a little unfinished portion, or I guess they didn't. I could have carved this out, okay? I'm just lazy. I could have carved that out. But this is kind of just not very comfortable, though I could have, edited this on my own. That's not the main reason why this isn't so comfortable to hold. The main reason it's not so comfortable to hold, I think, just because it's a very, long palette, and I think that the balance is just kind of too far this way. I think for my take, I don't know. I mean, again, I'm not being paid to review any of these. I'm just giving you my honest opinion on the palettes that I have and how I use them and why I like to use them. Yeah, it's not terribly balanced well, though. That doesn't matter too much. I think the real reason I don't like it is the weight. It's a very, very heavy palette, even though I didn't let too much paint dry on it. Alright, so now let's move on to Lumpy. So Lumpy is my favorite palette by far. It is a Turtlewood palette. Turtlewood is the brand, okay, not the type of wood. It is the most expensive palette, though I remember getting this at the Portrait Society of America conference. I mean, look at this. It's a huge palette, and it's really similar, I think, in size. I don't know if you can see, it's really similar in size to the New Wave palette, the new one that I just got in the mail. But the thing is, check this out. Lumpy is a very lumpy palette, and that is because there's a little story behind this, and I guess I can get into the story, but I let so much paint dry on this, okay? I mean, so much paint. This is how, it used to look very nice and uniform, even though there's lots of paint on the back, and you can really tell the history. I mean, this is a work of art on its own, to be honest. I'm truly a fan of palettes. But yeah, I let the paint dry so much, even with trying to scrape it off. There was just nothing I could do, and to get this uniform kind of brown gray color, what I did was one day with burnt umber and titanium white, I just painted over the entire thing and let it dry for a couple weeks, and then that's how I ended up getting Lumpy to look this way. Now, even though so much paint has dried on this palette, it's still not terribly unmanageable to hold. I mean, I can hold it for a long time, but there is quite a bit of fatigue, it's like doing arm curls. And again, like I said, there's a story to this palette. I mean, every palette for me has some kind of story. This one has the most sentimental one, however. Like I said, I got this palette a long time ago at a very discounted price at the Portrait Society of America conference. I think this was back in 2010 or 2011, a long time ago. I've had this palette for a long time, and I used to use this palette all the time back then, because back then I was also painting full-time after high school. And then I even went on to Studio Incaminati, the school that I talked about before, and I spent 2 semesters there. This was the main palette that I had when I was doing, plein air. I would also do outdoor still life paintings and stuff, and this was the palette that I used. Now, the sentimental reason is that, like I said, due to financial and family reasons, I was kind of, deterred away from continuing and pursuing art just because, you know, the whole story of how you're going to make a living with this. I mean, it still bothers me today. But what I did, I remember I was in my front lawn one day painting an outdoor still life. And I remember that was the day I decided, like, you know, maybe I should just listen to my family, listen to everyone. Like, you're not going to do anything with painting. You're just not going to succeed. And then I remember these marks right here pretty much mark the death of a palette. Like, if you let something dry in the mixing space, you know, over here and all over the place, if you let something dry in the mixing space, that's usually a sign, at least for me, okay, maybe different for you and others, but that's usually a sign, like, that you've kind of destroyed the palette. And I mean, it was a ton of paint that dried on this, okay? It was only several years later. Now, if you've been to my website, you may know the story of how I quit when I was like, I don't know, 20 or something like that. And then there was a 6-year gap where I would paint once in a while, but I wasn't, you know, painting full time because, you know, the motivation just wasn't as strong, just because I didn't really believe in myself. So then came along my YouTube channel, and then after so many weekly episodes, I turned it into daily, which, I mean, many people, you know, everyone's still telling me the same thing, like, you can't do this. You can't. You just simply can't. It's impossible, you know, to have a daily show. And I agree. At some point, I really don't know how much more I can handle with daily shows, just to continue to evolve, okay, you know, making even videos like this. As before, I would be making like a, you know, a weekly tutorial, breaking the rules or something like that, where I would voice it over, sit behind the screen, and then kind of hide, I think, you know, and just try to explain the painting process to you. But anyway, along came the YouTube channel, okay, and then came the Steve painting. Remember the large Steve painting? Somewhere, I think along the lines of after I started that, I decided to bring this palette back. And so what I did was I scraped as much as I could with my palette knife. And I think it's even still the same palette knife that I had back in like 2010, 2011 when I was painting with this palette. And scraped as much of it as I could off, and then I just painted over it with burnt umber, let it dry. And then I ended up bringing back this large palette for the Steve painting, and this is a palette you've seen for the majority of the footage in the Steve painting. So this palette does hold a lot of treasured memories to me, and it also kind of represents for me being able to rise up and continue to push. You know, what I once thought was a broken dream, like with this palette, you know, it was a broken dream for me because I just let the paint on the palette dry, and it just gathered cobwebs and stuff over the years, and I brought it back. And I really, to me, it meant so much to me, and I really want to share that kind of connection that I have with the palettes. Now, Lumpy is a heavy palette. I'm going to continue to use Lumpy, okay? And I really like the mixing size, and I like the way it looks. You know, when you hold a brush, right, it looks like a really good thumbnail. And I'm going to continue to use Lumpy, okay? Lumpy's not going anywhere. Lumpy is going to stay with us. Trust me on that one. But now, what we have is this New Wave is the brand, Grand View palette. Now, I'm not paid to say anything about it. The reason that I wanted to get this palette was because of the size of it. It was pretty much just as large as Lumpy. Like I said, I think Lumpy, they're pretty much almost the same size, minus this little gap here. Almost exactly the same size. I will say, I'm pretty sure that Lumpy, when I first got Lumpy, that Turtlewood palette, it was lighter. Before, I mean, how can I remember it perfectly, but I think it was lighter. Now, this palette doesn't have a balance on the back, but it's carved in such a way, at least I read, that, you know, it kind of eliminates the necessity for the balance, to have a balance. And look, it balances very nicely. See that? It balances very nicely. It's nowhere near as heavy as Lumpy. It's much lighter. It already feels easier to hold, but again, I'm not going to give you a review or anything on it because I just got the thing. I got to use this for several paintings before I can give you my honest opinion about it. But that being said, this palette is going to need a name. It's going to need a name. To me, it kind of looks like a ghost. You know, like the cartoon kind of image you would see of a ghost. It kind of looks like a ghost. So maybe somewhere along the lines of that. But let's name this palette. And we're going to have so many more awesome experiences with this palette. And now you know the history of all of my palettes, all of my handheld palettes, and now we have included a brand new palette to our repertoire of materials, or our whatever the word is, to the number of materials that I have. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is film the final stage of this painting. I almost even forgot what to say there. So this is going to be the selective render stage for this painting. Okay, this painting has already been oiled out. I oiled it out with the medium. So this painting footage you will see in tomorrow's episode, just because I wanted today's episode to be a little more about you getting to know me. I know it's a much shorter episode than my usual daily painting episodes, daily painting show. I thought about filming some of it and then splitting it into parts, but then I think that would probably be kind of confusing. I really wanted to share this story with you. I don't know if you feel the same way with your palettes. Do you feel a kind of connection to your handheld palettes? That is question of the day. Do you feel the same way? Some kind of emotional connection to your handheld palettes? And do you feel, as I feel, that the palette holds just as much, just as much weight to the development of the art, in my opinion, as, the artist applying the paint all on their own? I really do feel like there's a lot of connection that's made. You look at old photographs of like John Singer Sargent holding his palette. You look at the photographs of other painters of the past. I think there's one of like Alma Tadema with his palette on the ground somewhere like that. But I won't be inserting any pictures just because, copyright. That being said, I know that I was doing a lot of talking today, but I really, really, really wanted to share this experience with you. That being said, always remember, always remember, in a world that can be so negative, be the spark that ignites positivity amongst all of us. I really do hope that today's episode was interesting to you. I really hope that it helps you out. I wish you the best in all of your artwork, and I'll see you in another 24 hours. And now it's time for our new patron shout out. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mike Joyner, for becoming a member of my Patreon account. And again, the Patreon account is going to help fund and help support this YouTube channel. It will help us, have a studio with the slightest bit of ventilation. It'll help me upgrade the equipment, work from life, and all around provide better content for you. So thank you so much again to my new patron. I truly do hope that you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you tomorrow.